Duke University, a distinguished academic institution and a vortex of Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, and anti-Israel discrimination with its own history of genocide.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show. I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist and historian and author of IBM and the Holocaust, The Farhud, and many other books. If you like what this show is doing, tell a friend. Subscribe for passwords at theedwinblackshow.com. Today's episode is sponsored by the critically acclaimed book, Values That Shaped the World by Faye Lincoln, available in 11 editions in 190 countries, ebook, paperback, hardback, and gift edition. Favorite book of mine. Get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google, iTunes, and Kobo. If you want to support our work or sponsor a show, get yourself to theedwinblackshow.com/support. We have solidarity today from many national organizations and international, such as JNS, Stand With Us, the Israeli-American Council, the Gross Family Center, Emet, American Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists, Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, ZOA Michigan, and many others. We welcome guests today from, we have, it's right across America, coast to coast. We have Germany, I see Australia, Great Britain, Canada, Israel, of course, many more. Plus our three watch parties in the villages, Newton, Massachusetts, and Chicago, Illinois, my hometown. If you have a question limited to today's topic, place one sentence, repeat one sentence in Zoom's QA feature. No comments or opinions, please, because then we can't see the question. We don't want any questions from anyone called anonymous, so change your name now. The Edwin Black Show is growing globally. We speak frankly and without partisanship to a fragmented world, seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present, very, very tense, and a future still uncertain. First, the pre-monologue. Look around. Look at the ceiling, look at the walls. Now stop for a moment and think of the poor souls of Mayfield, Kentucky, and the surrounding communities. They have nothing. Their ceilings, their walls, their homes, their lives, their dreams, all gone by the destructive force of rotating winds. These people need help. The Edwin Black Show will be reaching out to the destroyed schools and libraries that must come back. If you choose to support the recovery, I never give to the Red Cross, where the money ends up in all the wrong places. I give to Samaritan's Purse, a great Christian relief organization. I say this much, and I say this once again. I warn you, do not become attached to things. To loved ones, yes, but not to things. One further admonition, none of us are owners on this earth. We're all renters. We can all be evicted at a moment's notice. Enjoy what you have as you have it. And now for our main topic, anti-Semitism at Duke University. Wow, Duke University, a distinguished academic institution and a vortex of Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, and anti-Israel discrimination with its own history of genocide. I like Duke University. I've lectured there several times in 2011 when I led North Carolina's official drive to compensate eugenics victims for the state's campaign to eliminate Black people from the planet, and Duke's support for Hitler's race wars. Duke supplied the expertise to the North Carolina Eugenics Board on which so-called undesirable families should be forcibly sterilized by a public health mandate. Until 1969, Duke actually published the Eugenicide Guide, Eugenics Quarterly. Not only does the Genocide Treaty Article 3 define Duke's pivotal role as genocide in trying to eliminate Black and poor people, but the Duke community knows this and has openly said as much. I was honored by the historically Black North Carolina Central University with the Drum Major for Justice Award for my discoveries, and I wrote about it in a special appendix to my best-selling eugenics book, War Against the Weak. And I have a special appendix about North Carolina's genocide. So, Duke, we know what you did back then, and we know what you have been doing lately. We know that you have hosted an epicenter of fake facts about Jews in Israel. You just can't get it right. In 2019, you co-hosted a Gaza conference that featured provocative lyrics troubling to Jews. Paragraph 5 of your discrimination resolution obligates you to take steps with regards to, quote, race, national origin, discrimination, shared or perceived ancestry, including but not limited to anti-Semitic harassment. I have the document right here. And yet we have the case of Students Supporting Israel. Students Supporting Israel is a mild-mannered student group that advances knowledge about Israel. November 11th, 2011, SSI was granted official recognition for its Duke chapter by the Duke student government. On November 13th, a student tweeted the false and offensive statement, quote, "My school promotes settler colonialism," close quote, with respect to SSI's recognition. This statement is ignorant. So, SSI did exactly what they should do in an academic setting. On their Instagram account, they politely and civilly offered to inform this person of the facts. SSI wrote, quote, "To Yana and others like her, please allow us to educate you on what, quote, settler colonialism actually is and why Israel does not fall under this category whatsoever. These types of narratives are what we strive to combat and condemn, period," close quote. This is civil tone. This Jewish group that dared speak up for Israel, this Jewish group that had the uppity chutzpah to speak truth to ignorance, was then taught a lesson. Student government president Christina Wang took it upon herself at that point to exercise a rare veto of SSI's chapter recognition, claiming SSI had made things unsafe. Unsafe? By trying to politely talk historical fact in an academic setting, namely Duke, where the motto on its seal is eruditio et religio, which literally means knowledge and religion. SSI gets shut down for that. Now civil rights attorneys are involved, and they in the Jewish community will not stop until the Duke administration undoes the damage to our satisfaction. Lawsuits are being readied right now, and if they are filed, I hope the individuals who engineered this harassment are named individually as defendants and co-conspirators. There is still time, Duke, to avoid next steps. Now for the history lesson that SSI didn't get a chance to offer. Pay attention, uninformed snowflakes. We hear this fake phrase, settler colonialism, on many campuses. Here is why it's fake. To be a colonial enterprise, the colony must send back its value back to the mother country as part of the exploitative system. That's what American colonies did with Britain and German colonies in Africa, and so on. In Israel, Jews returned to their ancient land and sent nothing anywhere. It was the opposite. People worldwide sent stuff to Israel to support it. But the Arabs did sweep into Jerusalem in 637. They colonized it and then sent back stuff to the caliphate. Here are the details, and students for justice in Palestine, get a piece of paper and a pencil and take notes. The Jews are from Judea. and indigenous to the land. The Arabs are from Arabia, that is the Arabian Peninsula. Mecca is 1,000 miles away from Jerusalem. They are the invaders. In the 7th century, the Arabs swept out of southern Arabia and conquered 3 continents. During this process, known to history as the Islamic conquest, the Arabs conquered indigenous people on 3 continents and forced them to convert. This includes the peoples of Africa. In Africa, the Arabs invented skin color-based slavery, murdered 15 million Africans, and at the turn of the 19th and 20th century facilitated the mass murder of millions of Congolese by Belgium's King Leopold II. That's how Sudan got its name. Sudan means black man. Zanzibar means city of the slaves. Today, now, in 2021, the common Arab word for a person of African descent is abid, which means slave. Just type these 3 words into Google: Arab slave trade. Now let's get to the settler part of the false statement. It is true that under international law established by the League of Nations, continuously ratified by 60 countries, and re-ratified by the United Nations, Jews were continuously mandated to engage in close settlement of the land from where they were previously evicted. But the Israel that emerged just after its War of Independence is approximately 1/2 comprised of Jews from Arab countries such as Syria, Iraq, Egypt, and a dozen other countries who engaged in an open, coordinated ethnic cleansing of 850,000 men, women, and children who were expelled penniless and stateless and forced by these Arab countries into Israel. This means Baghdad, not Brooklyn, and Cairo, not Chicago. These people, they are just from across the river, down the coast, and expelled from where they had dwelled 2,700 years in peace, 1,000 years before Muhammad, expelled in complete partnership with Nazis who had escaped justice after World War II and relocated to Arab countries to continue Hitler's war against the Jews with their Arab partners who had been loyal throughout the entire Third Reich. Please Google Yom HaGirush. Y-O-M is Yom, HaGirush, that's H-A-G-I-R-U-S-H. In 1948, a newly invented country was 2 years old called Jordan, illegally invaded Judea and Samaria and changed the land's name to the West Bank. Jewish property was stolen, Jews were evicted. The Arabs of that region did not seek independence or national identity. In 3 conferences held in Ramallah, Jericho, and Hebron, they voted to have no national identity, but instead to accept citizenship of Jordan. For some 70 years, stretching back to the late 1800s, Jews had been known as the Palestinians. The Palestine Post, the Jewish Agency for Palestine, the Palestine football team, the Palestine Symphony Orchestra. In the 1960s, it became clear the Jews in Israel could not be forced into the sea, so the Soviet KGB entered the scene. It was 1964 and helped create the Palestine Liberation Organization as a Cold War tactic. Then the Arabs committed identity theft and expropriated the word Palestinians. So it meant not Jews in the land of Israel, but Arabs. For weeks, I've been offering on this show $100 to the first person who can show me any reference to the Arabs of the region as Palestinians before 1964. Just one headline, photo, document, UN resolution. In fact, let's do this together. Let's try UN Resolution 181 that tried to establish a 2-state solution, one for Jews and one for Arabs. Now, there's more to this story. Zionism and the physical land of Israel are inseparable from Judaism. The 613 mitzvot, or good deeds, that Jews must perform are in many cases directly tied to the physical land of Israel. Being Jewish is more than lox and bagels. I know our people are ignorant. but there is a community within our people who are trying to remind drifted away and ignorant Jews of the real facts. More to the story, when Jews are defamed, when a member of the Students for Justice in Palestine at Duke University screamed the F word at all Zionists and no action is taken, we see the double standard. And we can also see that when ignorance meets prejudice and a double standard as well, action must be taken to correct the facts and rectify the injustice. I tried 6 times to get a representative of the Duke administration to give me a guest to have their side of the story. Duke wouldn't even give us a statement. They never replied. But 2 guests here will take it away. We have Alyza Lewin, the president of the Brandeis Center, an esteemed civil rights attorney who has taken up the cause. She's a frequent guest. But first, we will hear from the founder of Students Supporting Israel. That's Ilan Sinelnikov. Take the screen, Ilan.
Hello, everyone. First of all, Edwin, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for many years of friendship, Students Supporting Israel. And I never stopped learning from you. Even today on the show, I did Google and research Zanzibar and Sudan. That was new to me. And also a big thank you to Alyza that was supporting us and our students and is here on the panel. Your support to our students is priceless, so we really appreciate it. Basically, I'm the founder of Students Supporting Israel. I registered the first Students Supporting Israel chapter nearly 10 years ago at the University of Minnesota in order to have a pro-Israel voice on our campus. As we started growing on our campus, we managed to pass the pro-Israel resolution in our student government in 2014. And then when we got invited to a conference in Chicago, we met other students and we offered them to start Students Supporting Israel on their campus. The second and third chapter joined us in Nebraska and Indiana and Chicago. And the Students Supporting Israel turned into a national student movement, just like Students for Justice in Palestine that we touched on. Now, fast forward 10 years later, almost 10 years later, just like on every campus, when we get approached first by students, we tell them that we will provide you the resources, we will teach you how to run a club. And one of the first steps in order to become a Student Supporting Israel chapter, you need to register on campus in order for you to be a recognized student club, just like any other club at any university. We're going to be able to use the university resources that way and to be an organic and authentic part of the campus community. Our students at Duke, who were young students, they're freshmen and sophomore, followed on the process and took it in a very exciting manner to bring a pro-Israel voice to their campus. And their excitement was met with many challenges, with injustice, and with discrimination. Now, what happened at Duke University happened a few times in the past on other college campuses, but we don't see it often. Now, at Duke, as their students decided to register the club, we were recognized, we were chartered as a student club. And at Duke University, the student government is approving the student clubs. So in many universities, the university itself approves student clubs. At Duke, the case is different. The student government need to vote you in order to be a recognized student club on campus. So we got voted in, and we were happy. An article in the school newspaper, the Duke Chronicle, was published about Students Supporting Israel being chartered on campus. And that happiness lasted for approximately 5 days. 5 days after we were registered, I got a text message from our students basically saying that the president of the student government vetoed our club on campus. And why they vetoed the club on campus? Simply because our students responded to a screenshot, to a comment, on Twitter, which is a public social media platform, blaming Israel and settler colonialism. Now, not only they responded to it, which was totally the right way to do. This is why Students Supporting Israel was established in the first place. If we're not going to respond to it as Students Supporting Israel, there is no purpose of us being around. And what was interesting to me, it was that the school and people in student government and the advisor even suggested that we should apologize for singling out a student on a social media. Now, at first, our students needed to even think, do we need to apologize or not? But that's when we came into the picture and we said, there should be no apology. It's not even a part of the conversation. You're being singled out because you commented to a student online that blamed you in settler colonialism. If you're not going to be able to comment to it, what is going to happen when next semester someone will blame Israel with being an apartheid state or with committing genocide over the Palestinians? Then if we cannot come into any of that, what's the point of having an Israel club on campus? So we started a whole campaign in order to not only gain back our charter, but also to fight back this discrimination in student government and to make sure that the university itself, that should be the responsible adult in the room, reverses the decision of the student government, disciplines the student government, and charters SSI just like any other club. We don't need anything extra. We don't need a special status. All we need is the same recognition as any other club on campus. And now it has been almost a month and a half since the whole issue unfolded in the first place. And as of today, we're still not officially recognized as a student club. The university still hasn't officially reversed such a decision. If I have a background noise, I apologize for that. And the university haven't reversed the decision. They gave us a status and they said that all the resources will be provided to SSI, but we don't know what those resources are. And we're still working in order to solve that issue and to make sure that this injustice will turn into justice for our students. Because if that's going to be the case at Duke, I'm afraid that our universities and our campuses are heading this direction in other places as well. First, they're going to come after the Israel club, then they will come after the Jewish clubs. It's that simple. And in SSI, we're on the front lines of fighting for Israel and for the Jewish students on campus. And sometimes we take the hit, but that's exactly the reason to why we were established for, in order to push back, to fight back, and not just sit and turn the other cheek. So this is in very short about the story about what happened there. And I'll be happy to give the mic back to you, Edwin.
All right. Well, listen, we're so happy that you shared the story. And we also hope that the students who were on the campus in North Carolina, how are they doing?
So the students that were on the North Carolina campus were caught by surprise. Because as you might imagine, when a freshman and a sophomore students want to start an Israel club, that's not usually the first thing that they face. The first thing that if everything works properly, they host their first tabling session, they host their first event, they build their club, they engage with students, they have positive experiences. And that's what we want them to have.
All right, you were singled out. It's clear. You were grilled when you applied. It was even a headline in the newspaper that you had been granted recognition. So you've told us what your experience was on the ground. Now we're going to talk to a groundbreaking attorney, and that's Alyza Lewin, and she's going to tell us what the law has to say about this. Alyza, take it away.
Hi, Edwin. Thank you very much for inviting me again to be on this program. It's a delight to be here with you and with Ilan, whose students are really extraordinary on campus. The courage and conviction and pride that you see from the students supporting Israel is inspiring. So I commend him and commend you for running this program. So when you talk about the law, there are really two pieces here to why what's happening at Duke is problematic. So first of all, as you explained, and as Ilan described it, SSI has been singled out and has been treated differently. Right? What you have is a proud, unabashedly, unapologetic, Jewish pro-Israel organization whose purpose, right, and who's there is to educate and to wear their pride in their Jewish ancestral and ethnic heritage on their sleeve, right, to be able to explain to people about this Jewish identity, right, and to be able to correct the misinformation and the disinformation that we're seeing on campus. That's what Students Supporting Israel is all about. And this organization was treated in unlike any other organization ever, right? They were subjected to unusually a high level of scrutiny, both before they were approved and then certainly in the hearing afterwards when they were debating whether or not to uphold the student government president's veto. The veto itself was unprecedented. Never, ever before has a student government president at Duke used that veto power to revoke the recognition of a student organization. That's never been done. And the veto power is used so infrequently. The last time I think it was used was back in 2008 18 maybe, and that was for a funding issue, right? It is never been used, as I say, to revoke the recognition of a student organization. So here what you have is this pro-Israel, proud Jewish organization being excluded, right? Being denied the opportunities that are provided to recognized student organizations, the opportunities for funding, the opportunities for reserving spaces on campus, tabling, whatever those are. SSI was being singled out and excluded. So there you have the basis of discrimination on the basis of their Jewish ancestral ethnic identity, a form of national ethnic heritage discrimination, national ethnic origin discrimination. But there's another piece here, which is very important and very significant, which is the speech issue. Because what you realize is SSI, why was it sanctioned? It was sanctioned for its speech, right? It was punished for speech that was, as you pointed out, very respectful, very polite. In fact, it's exactly the kind of speech and engagement that universities should be encouraging and fostering, right? We want to encourage this kind of respectful dialogue and education and having people share their different perspectives and their understandings. That's what universities are all about, right? And so what happened here is instead, SSI attempts to engage in that type of speech, and it's sanctioned and silenced and cut out. Now, people don't totally understand or appreciate that the university is also at risk of losing its funding if it doesn't adequately protect the speech or the right to free expression of the members of its community. So in our letter that we sent earlier this week to the president of Duke University, we explained that there is actually a regulation. The Department of Education has a regulation which is called the Religious Liberty and Free Inquiry Reg. It's implemented by Executive Order 13864. And what that reg says is that for a private institution, when it has policies that state that they will protect the free expression of the members of the university community, when the administrators make statements talking about how they will protect the free expressions of the free expression of the members of the community, those policies and those statements are treated as creating a contractual obligation because the students, the faculty, the Department of Education, nonprofits, everyone relies on those statements the way they would a contract. And so the university has an obligation to live up to that contract. They must protect the right to free expression to the extent that they say that they will. What the regulation says is that any private institution that receives federal grants, that receives federal money, it says, and this is a quote, each grantee that's an institution of higher education that is private must comply with its stated institutional policies regarding freedom of speech, including academic freedom, as a material condition of the department's grant. So in other words, if you don't live up to your stated policies, if you fail to adequately protect the student's right to free speech, you could be disqualified from receiving the federal funds. So the university has to be careful, both because this is an act and appears to be an act of discrimination on the basis of the students and the club's Jewish ancestral and ethnic identity, but it also needs to be concerned because this is a clear case of having sanctioned and punished this group on the basis of speech, which is a failure to protect them and live up to the university's obligations and their stated contractual obligations to protect their right to speech. And I will point out that FIRE, which is the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, which gives universities ratings on how well and how strongly they protect free expression on campus. They've written now a couple of letters to Duke. They send one right after the student government president issued her veto. They wrote to her saying, before the student government affirmed it, you can't do this. This is a violation of SSI's rights to free expression and speech. And then after that student government decision upholding the veto, they wrote again to the president of the university, urging them to do what we have said, which is it's very simple for Duke to correct this. What they have to do is the administration just needs to recognize SSI as a recognized student organization and say, we will give you the same rights, the same opportunities, the same access. They haven't. What they did instead is the president issued a statement that said there are many organizations that continue to operate at Duke in different ways without such formal recognition, and that the university has identified, this is quote unquote, identified options for SSI. Identifying options for SSI is not sufficient. And that's what FIRE said, that's what the Brandeis Center said, that is what the ZOA has said, that's what Zahor Legal has said. There are many organizations now that have written to the university to say, you must do what, quite frankly, what Williams College did a few years ago, when a similar situation happened at Williams, where there was a pro-Israel student group that took care of all the requirements and applied to the student government for recognition. And shockingly, the student government refused to recognize, this was at Williams, the pro-Israel student organization. And there was an outcry. The president of Williams at first said exactly the same, just as the president of Duke said, don't worry, you'll have almost equal access. And there was a professor, not at Williams, but actually a law professor at George Mason Scalia Law School, who filed a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights in the Department of Education saying this is clear discrimination against this Jewish group. And that's when ultimately the president of Williams figured out a way to grant that student group recognized status. And they entered into a resolution agreement with the Office for Civil Rights, where they agreed that the student organization at Williams would be considered a recognized student organization and receive completely and total equal access, the same as all the other recognized student orgs. That's what Duke has to do. It's very simple. That's what Duke has to do.
Alyza, that is a great presentation. Have you gotten a response from your letter to Duke?
No, we have not heard from Duke yet.
Well, they better wake up. I think what we're talking about here is they would like the students supporting Israel to be separate but equal. They say you can get on the bus, you just have to ride in at the back. And we only want parity. They've got to be treated like any other group, and I have to applaud the civility of SSI in the face of this kind of rambunctiousness. Now, we're loaded with questions. We have a triple-digit audience here. We have many, many questions. They're all over the place here. Several people have asked me a question about the president, Vincent Price. It's not Vincent Price from the House on Haunted Hill, or I know Ilan doesn't know what that is, or the horror movies, or Frankenstein, or anything else. It's a different Vincent Price. Okay, but we hope he doesn't make a mistake. Let's start taking the questions that we have. We always take the watch parties first. We have a watch party in the Villages, also known as Florida. How can a university tolerate so much misinformation and false history? Well, these are institutions of lower learning. Previously, there were institutions of higher learning. And I should say, in all the genocides and discriminations and persecutions I've covered that have occurred throughout the last couple of 100 years, it always seems to start with falsity on the university, and it branches out from there. That's what eugenics was, that's what race science was in Nazi Germany, and by the university allowing fake history, fake facts, and fake ethnic disparagement, racism, anti-Semitism to flourish and fester, they're actually creating a bed of further abuse, which will blossom. Ilan, you're one who deals with many universities. How many universities do you have right now?
Well, until today, we worked on 160 college campuses in SSI.
Does that include Duke?
Duke is one of our newest chapters, correct?
All right, well, guess what, Duke? They're coming back. And have you found that the universities are no longer the institutions of higher learning that they were, that they allow these false narratives and false history and false facts to flourish?
Indeed, I was actually arguing that for about 10 years from the moment we've been establishing a society. Today, there is so much misinformation on campuses and student governments. And of course, the university protects those speeches in the name of freedom of speech. They protect it and say that, well, all narratives needs to be heard. But it's not a matter of all narratives needs to be heard. It's about a matter of there is a correct narrative and there is a wrong narrative. And when we make it to be seen that every voice should be heard, we ignore, like you said, the historical facts and the historical evidence. What bothers me in the situation at Duke, it's not even necessarily, even if the school will recognize SSI, sure, it would be great. But the fact that 38 student senators voted SSI down, okay, that's not going to change. They voted us down, and that best reflects the environment on college campuses, that you have a university student government with the top student leaders on that campus at Duke, and 38 of them are voting solely against the Israel Club. The only 3 people voting for SSI is the 3 Jewish student senators. So this thing will be very hard to change. And this is the environment, not just at Duke, but in many college campuses.
I applaud you for the Beit Seam. That's Hebrew for chutzpah. I applaud you for the Beit Seam that you've been able to hold your head up high on these campuses. You've done a great job. And I assure you, you'll be having coffee at Duke very, very soon. Let's go to the next question. This is from Newton, Massachusetts. Is this action not in direct violation of the government order or consent decree? Alyza, you didn't talk about their consent decree, which is called, quote, a resolution. Tell us about that.
So you talked, Edwin, about the conference that was held a few years ago together with UNC, and there was a complaint filed at that point with the Department of Education, with the Office for Civil Rights, and it resulted in what's called a resolution agreement. I actually saw, I think one of the questions that was posted in the Q&A asked about how likely it is that the Department of Education actually ever withholds funding from these universities. And the answer to that question is very rarely, because what happens in each of these cases is that once the Office for Civil Rights starts its investigation, universities say, okay, let's negotiate a resolution agreement. What steps do we as a university need to take to satisfy you that we've addressed this discrimination, and therefore you can continue to give us the funding? So there was a resolution agreement that was negotiated with Duke and with UNC. And the thing is that then there's a monitoring period. So there were certain steps that the university had needed to take at that time in terms of addressing how they define anti-Semitism when it comes to their anti-discrimination policy and training sessions. But the resolution agreement comes with a monitoring period. In other words, for a few years, the Department of Education will be monitoring the Duke's and UNC's, because they have a separate RA, but Duke's compliance with this resolution agreement. And so Duke should be particularly sensitive to making sure that it addresses these issues, because even if they're not an outright direct violation of the steps that they were required to take under the RA, it clearly appears to be a violation of the spirit of the RA, because they're not addressing adequately this example right now of the discrimination.
All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, we've got something new and expanding at the Edwin Black Show. We have something called show notes. So if you go to the edwinblackshow.com and you click on the episode homepage, you're really just on the front page. It says show notes. We've given you a great deal of resources, the letters, the media articles, and we will continue after this show to educate you on what's being done about Duke and the specific students who attacked these Jewish kids just for being Jewish and for trying to support Israel. Let's go to our watch party in Chicago. How could the students how could the students as individuals be held liable? Alyza, the individual students who acted to deprive SSI of their civil rights, et cetera, who caused this anguish? How can they or should they be held personally and individually liable?
So my understanding from the statement that was issued by the university is that they've started an investigation. And what I assume that means is that in part they are looking to see whether there were any code of conduct violations by the president, perhaps when she vetoed the group's recognition in this fashion. That would be something that the university would have to look at. And then inevitably, and you see this already from their statement, that to the extent that they decide to take any kind of action, if they do decide that there were violations of their conduct code, those violations and how they treat them, those sanctions, would be private and protected by student privacy laws in terms of their ability to disclose what they actually did and steps they actually did when it came to that student. What is not protected and restricted in terms of privacy laws would be the university's ability to make a statement saying, look, we are here, we want to make sure that our university, number one, is a safe, welcoming space for students from all backgrounds, and therefore we won't tolerate discrimination or excluding any group on the basis of its shared ancestry and ethnicity. And to the extent that that may have been what happened to SSI, we are going to overturn that. And we are here and we celebrate and we protect free expression, and we won't tolerate silencing or excluding or sanctioning any group on the basis of their speech. And therefore, for that reason, we are also recognizing today SSI as a recognized student organization. They can make that statement because that has nothing to do with the privacy issues of a particular student.
Well, now what you've described is what Duke could do, but couldn't these individual students who have conspired to deprive SSI of the ordinary enjoyment of their civil rights, et cetera, couldn't someone complain to the federal government about them specifically?
I think the complaints that would be filed against the university for failing to take adequate action to protect the Jewish students. The entity that has the authority to perhaps sanction the students would be the university if the university decided that what those students did violated the university's code of conduct. That's where the individual students might potentially, that's where they could be sanctioned.
Okay, well, we'll see if civil litigation emerges out of this. Let's go to our next question here. Madeline from London, England. I'm amazed people are still watching from London with all their lockdowns. Why are the Jewish people so ignorant of their own history? Who should answer that? Let's start with Ilan. You're one who's trying to educate Jews and non-Jews. Have you found that Jews themselves, especially the younger generation, just don't know the historical facts, the cultural facts about their own people?
Indeed, and I think it's a matter of also being very comfortable nowadays. A lot of times when we go to high schools, for example, or when we go even to college campuses and we ask the simple question from the students, can someone define what Zionism means or explain what Zionism is? And a lot of students don't necessarily have like the very straightforward answer that Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. So you start hearing people stuttering or like raising half a hand, saying like we know, but we don't know. And this is actually one of our biggest challenges and problems, because when the Jewish students don't even know to define Zionism. But on the other hand, you have organizations like Students for Justice in Palestine that can write a whole graduation paper about what Zionism is. We will be in a problem, because when people define what Zionism is for us, we will never win this fight.
Okay, here's the definition of Zionism. 2 words: Jewish nationalism. That's it. You said it in a slightly longer form. It's the effort of national identity of the Jewish people, and it's no different than Armenian nationalism, Arab nationalism, and all the other nationalisms that came to the fore. Lisa, do you have
Edwin, I
something?
just want to say it's more than that. It's not just a national political movement. Zionism is integral to the identity of Jews. Zionism is for many Jews as integral to their identity as Jews as observing the Jewish Sabbath or keeping kosher, right? This is not a political opinion, right? This is an expression for many of their Judaism, right? For centuries, Jews have celebrated and recognized that we not only share a common faith, right? It's not just that we share a common religion, but we share a common history. We share a common ancestry. We are the Jewish people. We are the people of Israel, the nation of Israel. And if you celebrate our shared ancestry and ethnicity, which is completely and totally inextricably intertwined with the land of Israel, right? That is our homeland. That's our ancestral homeland. That's where we as a people began, right? That celebration, that recognition, and that yearning to return once again, and belief that the Jews will return, right? There'll be this ingathering of the exiles and that they will return once again and reestablish our right to self-determination in our ancestral homeland. That is L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, right? That is what the Jews say next year in Jerusalem, every year at the Passover Seder and on Yom Kippur. That is a key part for many people of what it means to be Jewish.
We're getting all these comments from people, extremely well-spoken, Alyza. You've got your own fan base on this show, Alyza. But I did not mean to exclude all the things that Alyza said, because remember, when Moses led the children of Israel out, he didn't go to Plymouth Rock. He didn't go to Saudi Arabia. He went to Jerusalem. So the Jewish people have a religious connectivity to the land of Israel and Jerusalem. One more
It's
thing. quickly.
religion, it's religious, but it's also ethnic and historical. And just like, and this is what people have to realize, just not every Jew is a Zionist, but not every Jew observes the Sabbath, or not every Jew keeps kosher. But if you ask any Jew why they observe the Sabbath, why they incorporate any type of Sabbath observance into their life, and there's obviously a wide spectrum of what that looks like, they'll tell you they do it because that's what it means to them to be Jewish. By the same token, if you ask a Jew, why do you feel this connection to Israel? Very frequently, what they'll say to them is, that's part of what it means to be Jewish, is for me to feel this connection, this deep Jewish pride and connection with the land of Israel. And so when Jews are discriminated against because they're Sabbath observers, we recognize and understand that as discrimination. What people don't seem to understand is that when Jews who celebrate this shared ancestry and ethnicity, who celebrate this connection to the land of Israel, are discriminated for that expression, that is an expression of what it means to them to be Jewish. That's equally discriminatory as discriminating against somebody for
And I would just like to add one cadenza to what Ilan said about the comfort level. I think it was my generation, not me, but my generation after the Holocaust, that wanted to separate themselves from Jewish experience, assimilate, and protect their kids from the antagonisms of history. There was a shah going on, and they failed to do what was necessary.
I would like to just address, there's one question because I want to make sure we get this in before you close, about the university's attempt to distance itself from the actions of the student government by suggesting the student government is separate.
Well, I've got several questions like that. So go ahead, take it, Alyza.
Okay, so first of all, they should realize that the university is not, the student government is not totally separate and independent. The university, first of all, delegates certain responsibilities to the student government. So they've delegated, as Ilan said, in this case, the responsibility of recognizing student organizations. In many universities, the university does it. Here, they actually delegated that to this student government. They delegate here the responsibility of collecting student funds that are fees that are required by the university, and then determining how to distribute those fees among the student organizations. So the university has used the student government in that way and delegated responsibilities. But also, in general, people have to understand that student governments are part and parcel of the educational opportunities that are offered by universities. The universities don't need the student governments. The reason they have the student governments is to give students the opportunity to see what it is to engage in the democratic process, to try and run a campaign, to go through an election, to get elected, to then actually participate in and run in a kind of model student government. But that means that just like the university has the obligations to monitor all of its educational opportunities and make sure that they don't run afoul of the law or don't, if the idea here with a student government is that you're supposed to be giving them the opportunity to engage in democracy, if it turns out that the participants are undermining that objective and taking steps that violate the policies, the principles of the universities, or violate the law, the university must step in and correct that. That's why the university has a liaison to the student government.
That is absolutely correct. And if some
if I
wacko,
can,
just a minute, and then we'll go to you, but we're going to have to wrap on that question. If some wacko racist student government said, oh, we're not going to allow Black people to use the student union or something, we don't recognize them because they're Hispanic, the university would never tolerate that. 30 seconds. Ilan, what do you got?
no, I just want to add that when SSI applies for registration, we always say in our constitution, because that's required, that students supporting Israel will operate under the rules of the university, of the city, and the state it's located. It goes the same to the student government. So the university cannot run away and saying they're separate.
All right, let's get to our next question. Sarah in Chicago, my hometown. Sarah, what the heck is going on in Chicago? Anyway, her question here is, why do Black students take up the cause of the Palestinians and the Arabs when the Arabs victimized so many in Africa, and where can I learn more? The Black community has been snookered, especially the students, by the Palestinians. All this stuff about from Ferguson to Palestine, they have no idea what they're talking about. If they knew for 1 second that the Arab word, that the Palestinian word from one who was descended from Africa is abid, slave. If they knew for 1 minute that for 1400 years, Arabs were in slavery due to the Arab slave trade, if they knew that only 388,000 slaves were kidnapped and brought into the United States, but 15 million for 1,000 years before that were enslaved and murdered and worked to death by the Arabs throughout the Middle East and parts of Asia, they would take a more enlightened point of view. But it's all part of this not having any information about anything. And here's something else. Next time you look at a lot of these social justice riots, look for the Palestinian flag in the crowd and you will see it. I'd like my Black brothers and sisters, remember I grew up on the south side of Chicago, to wake up and look at the facts. You want to learn more? For years, my team knows I've been working on a book about the exploitation of the Blacks going back centuries in Africa. I also wrote a very important article on this in the Times of Israel. Thank you, Sarah in Chicago. Stan in Miami. Is there hope for a two-state solution? No way, Jose. It's not going to happen. When you spend all your resources paying for terrorism, for murderers, and teaching kids 3, 4, 5, 6 years of age to kill Jews, there's no hope. Now, we covered this a week ago on this show, and soon, if there's a video editor in the crowd, give me a call. We're going to get this up and running on our YouTube channel on the Edwin Black Show, and you'll see exactly why. Here is a note from Harvey in Toronto. Why is it called Palestine, not Israel? Everybody knows this, who's a scholar and even who's not. It was called Israel and Judea. When the Romans kicked the Jews out, they changed the name to Palestine, Syria, Palestina, and that was named for Greek island invaders. Had nothing to do with Arabs. The name just stuck. The Ottoman Turks had sway for, I guess, 471 years, and they kept the name Palestine or the Holy Land. And then at the end of the 19th century, they went modern, but not the original. Modern Zionism came to the fore. They, of course, kept the name, but Israel changed the name to the name it wanted, which was Israel. Let's go to the live chatting. We have many questions here. Robert Gutman, what is the best answer to the claim that the university administration has no authority over the student government? I think that Alyza has addressed that. They'll have the authority when they have to have the authority. And SSI is not going to settle for being separate but equal with sitting in the back of the bus. So we've already dealt with that. Deborah Glazer, something tells me you're from California. I might know you in my investigation of UCLA. Fordham University, also a private institution, has denied status to Students for Justice in Palestine on its campus. That denial has been upheld by a lower court. How will you differentiate Duke's wrongful actions from the Fordham situation? Alyza, take it.
So the Fordham situation, they actually it was upheld because the court recognized that SJP was so divisive and so hostile and negative in terms of its approach, and that they felt then that the university had the right and the opportunity to decide that this student organization's activities were counter to the values of the university and the policies of the university. There's nothing here that suggests that that SSI has done anything to violate the policies or the conduct codes of the university. What they did is they respectfully engaged in speech or offered and invited to this student to come to a program to learn more. That's exactly what they had said they would be all about as an organization. There's no comparison between the two at all.
I have a question here from Wes in San Francisco. Must be fun to shop in San Francisco these days. Were any of the members of the board that voted down the club status Jewish? It's an interesting question, but not even a Jewish guy has got the right to discriminate against the Jewish people. And this is a common feature of what the Students for Justice in Palestine do. They find some sappy Jewish student with a name like Goldstein, Silverstein, Bronstein, or any other kind of Stein, maybe Frankenstein, and they get this guy to fall in line with what they want. And they say, even here's a Jewish guy. So really, it doesn't matter that. Ilan, what do you say?
Well, that's exactly what happened at Duke University. So while no student senators that were Jewish voted SSI down, one of the main speakers in the 3-hour debate on student government was a Jewish student who defined herself as an anti-Zionist. And she was honestly, Hamas would be proud in her speech, and that's how far she took it, saying that Israel does not recognize, does not represent all Jewish people. And she kept going and going. And of course, the student government hugged her and supported her. The school newspaper, the Duke Chronicle, gave a stage to a whole article that she wrote. And that one Jewish student, her voice somehow mattered more than the entire Jewish community at Duke University. And we continue seeing how people tokenize anti-Zionist Jews, even though their numbers are low, they're in the fringe of our community, and they make heroes out of them.
Well said. Let's go to Ned and Myrna in San Francisco. Are you, Edwin Black, afraid of being canceled for your speech?
At Duke University, for sure.
Listen, snowflakes, woke folk, I cannot be canceled by you, by Twitter, by anybody, okay? My job is to speak truth to power. If IBM couldn't cancel me, Ford, General Motors, Carnegie, Rockefeller, a couple of people with a Twitter account are not going to cancel me either. Thank you for the question, Ned and Myrna. I would like to say this is the first time we've had a joint question, husband and wife, I guess. Terry in Los Angeles, isn't being Jewish and being a supporter of Israel two separate things? Alyza, take it away.
Wait, repeat the question again, Edwin?
Terry in Los Angeles, isn't being Jewish and being a supporter of Israel two separate things? We've covered it, but Alyza, just answer for Miss Terry.
I think that Zionism, as we talked about, is for many Jews integral to Judaism. You can say, as a Jew, you might not support certain policies of the current government of Israel, right? Look at what Israel's filled. Jews in general, we all know the joke about Jews. You have two Jews, you have three opinions, right? There's Jews do a wonderful job about debating, and certainly about debating the policies of the government of Israel. There's all sorts of debate within the Jewish community, both in Israel and beyond. So just because you're Jewish doesn't necessarily mean you support all the actions of the government of Israel. But for many Jews, in fact, for most Jews, the idea of celebrating Jewish ancestry and recognizing that there is a deep historical, ancestral, ethnic, religious connection between the Jews and the Jewish homeland, that is for many Jews a key part of what it means to them to be Jewish.
We have a very good question here from Wes in Walnut Creek. And I believe Walnut Creek is where they had some of these big Nordstroms and things that were attacked. He says, I'm pretty ignorant about university clubs, but are there Greek clubs, French clubs, Vietnamese clubs? How is the Israel club any different? And why should this club be seen differently? I will just say that I know that there are German clubs, there were British clubs. Ilan, what do you know about clubs?
Well, every university has a wide range of clubs. I know in some public schools, there's up to like 600, 700 student clubs that represent different religious students or different nationalities. And some clubs are dealing with technology and environment. You know, you can find them all over the place. And the whole point is that students supporting Israel will be just like any other club on campus that engages in academic discussion, that brings more Zionism to the campus community, and educates its peers.
Wes, that was a great question. Thank you very much in Walnut Creek. Here's a question from David Greenberg. I don't know where you're from, David. Feel free to chat me up here. What is the position of Hillel at Duke? Well, let me tell you about Hillel at Duke. First of all, I appeared and was hosted by Hillel at Duke some years ago. I found that the director was just an excellent guy. He says he's from Richmond, Virginia. Thank you, David. He was an excellent leader. He knew his history. He was promoting Jewish identity. They had a huge building. They got along with everybody, including the Muslims and the Catholics and the Arabs and everybody else. They had kosher meals. He is not there anymore because I called to invite someone from Hillel to come on. So I don't know who his predecessor is, but we did call. We never got a call back. We sent an email. We never got a reply. So the position of Hillel at Duke is they ain't here. That's the position, David. Let's get to our next question here. Armando in Philadelphia. Can federal funds be cut off from Duke? And I've got another person who says the same thing here about that. So, Alyza, how much money can be cut off? What type of money? Is it possible?
So the way Title VI of the Civil Rights Act works is that it basically says any entity that receives federal government funds may not discriminate on the basis of race, color, national, ethnic origin. So in other words, if you find that a recipient of federal funds is discriminating, right? So it's not adequately protecting its students from discrimination, but it's actually permitting that discrimination to take place, then there's a risk that the Department of Education, when it does this investigation, could decide, okay, we can't give you the funds because you are not protecting your students from discrimination. You're engaging in the discrimination. So what that means is you get no funds. All your funds get cut off. But as we discussed before, that really doesn't actually happen.
What about congressional action? What can senators and representatives do?
Senators and representatives can write to the Department of Education. The original complaint that prompted the Office for Civil Rights to actually look at Duke and UNC after that conference, there were letters that were written by members of Congress, as well as the ZOA had sent a letter and filed a complaint. And so it is possible, and there have been investigations that have been initiated by the Department of Education because members of Congress have raised the issue. Anybody, right? It does not actually have to be, and people don't often realize that either. Title VI complaints can be filed by anybody who believes that a university has discriminated on the basis of national ethnic origin. So as I mentioned, the Williams case, right? When there was that student organization that was denied, the pro-Israel student organization was denied, it was a law professor at George Mason University. He had no connection to William, but he filed the Title VI complaint. Anybody can file that Title VI complaint. So the members of Congress, the senators, can also write to the Department of Education and file a complaint.
All right, now here Deborah Glazer corrects me. She says, I was in touch with you, not about UCLA, but Irvine, when we were filing criminal complaints in connection with the MSU disruption of college Republicans and the Israeli reservists on duty. I should say, not only I, but Stand With Us and the Brandeis Center has experience, and I guess I innovated this with the help of Alyza, of criminal prosecution in some cases. You could do this in California because they have specific statutes protecting educational enterprise.
Edwin, almost every one of the 50 states has some law on the books that makes it a criminal offense to deliberately try and disrupt and shut down an event. In most cases, that is the level of a misdemeanor. In some cases, it's actually lower. It's more like the level of a parking ticket. But it is important that students understand that this is a violation of the law in pretty much every state. And that's why when their events are disrupted, they should actually go file a police report. And if you have a video of the disruption, bring the video to the police and give them that documentation and that evidence.
I should interject
screenshots,
here.
right? If you have screenshots showing that these groups called on people to come and help them disrupt the event and shut down the event, those are really important pieces of evidence and pieces of documentation. And these folks who are organizing these disruptions should start racking up the equivalent of the parking tickets. It will, and that's what we saw, Edwin, at UCLA. It definitely deterred the perpetrators. They didn't do it again after they were hauled in.
And I would say that Alyza represents the Brandeis Center, and she flew staff in to walk these kids into the police station. The police would be compelled to take the reports. Lois Wiener, we've answered your question about the DOA. We have another question from the Bay Area about Vincent Price of Edward. Was there a mention of Vincent Price in Edward Scissorhands? I don't think so. But Vincent Price was not the one from Duke, was one of the greatest actors. He did a lot of The Pit and the Pendulum and those kinds of horror films. Let's get rid of that question. Shouldn't the entire Duke student government be forced to resign because of this discrimination? The question comes from Deborah in California. I know Deborah has experience fighting this kind of activity on the campus. Alyza.
So, whether or not all the members of the student government should be forced to resign, it is interesting, I will say, that after the Williams episode, what happened is it created such a brouhaha on campus that the students felt that the student government really was not functioning appropriately, was not adequately representing the interests of the student population at large. And they did ultimately bring about the implosion of the student government at Williams. And they did exactly that. All of the representatives ended up resigning. They drafted a whole new constitution and bylaws. There was a whole new election and a whole new student government that was actually elected after this episode at Williams where they denied the pro-Israel student group recognition. Now, whether something like that would happen at Duke, but that's what it led to. It was that was the breaking point.
That's fascinating. Someone remind me after the show that we should work on getting the entire student government to resign.
If I may add, Edwin, I think it's even more than that. Jewish students need to run for student government. Because right now, for many years, we've been counting on having friends in student government or allies that will protect us and have some mercy upon us, But there is no good Samaritans around here, Jewish students need to take, and Zionist students, Israel students need to take the matter into their hands, start campaigns, run, and be elected in student government. When I was a senior at the University of Minnesota, I was a student senator, and 10% of the student government at the time were members of students supporting Israel. No legislation would be able to be passed without our voting bloc. And that's what we need to see more on campuses. And again, it's something that students don't emphasize enough, but it's important.
All right, now listen, whoever you are, anonymous attendee, We don't take any questions from a guy named Anonymous. So you could restate your question if you put your name in. We have another question here from, well, we have a comment here, which I said, please don't give us, from Julie Sachs. If the student government is not acting in keeping with the law, it would seem that they must dissolve. And I think that I would agree with that. And I would say that it's time for people to take that approach. The student government is not omnipotent. They don't have the right to discriminate against Blacks, against Asians, against Hispanics, and they don't have the right to discriminate against people who are exercising their Jewish identity, and something's going to be done about it. Well, we're out of time, folks. This has been great. I want to thank my excellent guests, Ilan and Alyza. I'll see everyone here next week, 3 p.m. Eastern. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Go to theedwinblackshow.com/support. Naturally, if you're Jeff Bezos, just give me a call. I'm always here for you. If you're George Soros, as I say, my line is busy. But you can't be here next week. My staff has just corrected me. We're on hiatus next week. We will be back at the end of the year with the Vintage Boys. But until then, you can head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon platform in 190 countries across this planet, where you can find any of my 200 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust, War Against the Weak, and The Far Hood. You want an autographed copy? Hit my personal website, edwinblack.com, and click books. Get passwords and access alerts to participate live in future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show. Click that notification button. Follow me at Edwin Black Book on Twitter and Facebook, where I still have accounts, and I am zooming out.